On today's show, the winning streak is now over for the Hawks as a result of a disastrous, and I do mean disastrous, third quarter on Friday night against the Clippers. We'll get into all what transpired and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1930 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Friday evening into Saturday here in the middle of March. Today's show is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. If you're a new customer at FanDuel, get $200 in bonus bets. Your first $5 bet happens to win at FanDuel. The place to go is FanDuel.com to get started. I also want to encourage you at the top of the show, as I always do, to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you find your podcast. Just search Locked On Hawks on Apple, on Spotify, on Amazon Music, also on YouTube. Please like this video as you're watching it on that platform. And please do me a favor and spread the word about the podcast. Share it with your friends, family, coworkers, etc. Today's show, we'll be diving into what became a pretty weird and ugly loss for the Hawks, 121-98 at home against the Clippers. This snaps a winning streak for the Hawks. Now, keep that in mind throughout this podcast. Now, I'm kind of prone, if you're listening to the podcast regularly, to not quite be as reactionary as some might be. And I'll just say this. The Hawks just won 4 games in a row. And some of the reactions to this one were as if the Hawks had been losing for 2 weeks straight instead of winning for the last week and a half. But anyway, it was a rough one, as we'll get into in all kinds of depth on this podcast. But the streak is now over at 4. It was also Bogdanovich's return to Atlanta after about a month and a half since the trade. Also Terrence Mann's first game against his old team, etc. The Hawks were underdogs in this game at FanDuel. That's also notable as well, because I know they were at home, but the Clippers are good this year. And broadly speaking, the first half went pretty well for the Hawks. They're actually up by 8 points at halftime, despite a pretty rough half from Trae Young, which we'll come back to later on in the podcast. But then they had, in my opinion, and honestly, by the stats, it's not even close, but and even with taking into account the context and all of that, I think the worst quarter of the season for the Hawks. Even when you take into account who they were playing against, a good team, et cetera, the third quarter was an absolute and utter disaster for the Hawks tonight. I will get into more of the grisly details later on in this podcast, but the Hawks set a new season low in scoring with 8 points in the third quarter, a new season low. And by the way, they have not scored 8 points or fewer in a quarter in more than a decade, which speaks for itself, I would say. It was brutal, and Quinn said it after the game very plainly. I think Trae kind of alluded to this as well in the locker room. The Hawks just, rarely could you point to something just as clearly as this, but Quinn was like, we lost the game in the third quarter. Yeah, pretty much. The Hawks were not perfect in this game in the first, second, or fourth quarters. Keep that in mind. I'm big on nuance, and the Hawks did not play an A-plus game the rest of the game either, but they played well enough to win in 3 of the 4 quarters. In the third quarter, they had their worst quarter of the season. So that's enough to sink you against a pretty good team, and it's nothing. The game was basically over at that point in time. It wasn't all the way over. They were only down by 19. They were still in the game on periphery going into, the middle of the fourth quarter, but it was the run never came, and that was the end of that. So what went wrong? So I'll say the offense was certainly the contributing factor in this game. Of course, much of that was that one quarter along the way, but big picture, it was definitely an offensive loss for the Hawks. Atlanta had a 98 offensive rating in the game, which means they scored 0.98 points per possession. That is very, very, very bad. The worst team in the league is around 104, 105 this season. So that's obviously really, actually 106 right now is the worst team in the league with the Wizards. So terrible performance offensively on the whole. The Hawks now are 0-11 this year when they have an offensive rating of 102 or lower. Now, that's not a huge surprise. Most teams, when you score that little, are not going to win. So it's not like a condemnation of the Hawks that they can't win like that. But if you don't score, you're not going to win. That's the shortest version of that. And it was bad on its own, I will say that. But quite frankly, it really was one quarter. And that's crazy to say, but the numbers back that up. The Hawks had a 120 offensive rating in the first half. That's very good. How about this? In the fourth quarter, granted, a lot of it was kind of like garbage time adjacent. They were competitive, but it wasn't like they were in the game. But still, they had a, wait for it, 120 offensive rating in the fourth quarter. So 3 quarters, 120 offensive rating. And then you have the third quarter. In the third quarter, the Hawks had this is actually impossible, but it's also true. I made sure that it was a 32 offensive rating in the third quarter, 0.32 points per possession, 8 points on 25 possessions. And that's enough to single-handedly sink your entire profile offensively. So there's that. For the game, 51% true shooting is not like horrific, but it's pretty bad. They were 9 of 33 from 3 in this game, and that was a big culprit. But also, look, a very, very rough night from the guys the Hawks need to create offense. And of course, that is headlined by Trae Young. I think people were saying that this is Trae's worst game of the season. People have forgotten this. Trae had an absolutely awful game in early November against Boston that I believe was still his worst performance of the season. But this was definitely in the top or bottom, however you want to say that, 3 or 4 for Trae Young this year. He was not good in this game. The numbers individually look better than they actually probably were along the way. He had a couple points in the fourth quarter, but it was a brutal Trae game. And it was not only Trae, but the Hawks are generally going to be in trouble offensively if Trae is not playing well. And that was the case in this game. But it was not just him. In fact, their starting backcourt, versus this includes Trae, of Dyson and Trae, I would argue they're 2 best players that are available right now. With Jalen unavailable, I think Dyson and Trae are the 2 best players. Now, Dyson's defense was really good this game. Keep that in mind. But they combined to shoot 8 of 30 from the field. That's, going to get you beat most of the time. You throw in George Niang, who is a flawed player. George Niang is a rotation guy through and through, valuable player, but he's also their Hawks, I believe, their 4th leading scorer, maybe top 5 at the very least, since he actually arrived. He's averaging 14 points per game since he arrived in Atlanta. So throw him in there as well. The 3 of the top 5 scorers, Trae, Dyson, and George Niang, combined to shoot 8 of 35 from the field and 2 of 13 from 3. If that's all you're not winning. Like, you have to be so perfect everywhere else. And the Hawks did a lot of good things in this game, as much as that might sound crazy now. But that got them beat in a lot of ways. Now, the other factor that I have to get to is ball security. So if you might have read this in my preview, I wrote about this on patreon.com/BT Rowland, as well as on Fansided a little bit this week. But the first game against the Clippers went very badly for the Hawks in LA. And the biggest factor there was the lack of ball security. They turned the ball over like 25% of possessions in that game. It was really bad, and it killed them. This time, it was a little bit better than that, but the Hawks still turned the ball over on about a third of their possessions, which is a ridiculous number in that third quarter. And they had 14 live ball turnovers in the game. So 14 steals for the Clippers, and that allowed the Clippers to get downhill a lot. So when the Hawks were actually getting a shot to the rim, they didn't shoot well, but it wasn't a total disaster. The problem was when they turned the ball over, LA made them pay for it the entire game. And look, defensively, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't great. But a decent chunk of that was the offensive failure. Even Quinn said that post-game, kind of unprompted. He was like, look, we missed a bunch of good looks offensively, which is true. And then that let the Clippers get downhill. And yeah, I could circle some moments on film where it was bad defensively. It was not a good defensive performance from the Hawks. They had a 122 defensive rating in the game. That's not good. But I think the Clippers hit some tough shots. Harden and Kawhi in particular hit a bunch of tough shots. That happens. The Hawks also had some breakdowns. That also happens. But I have a hard time getting worked up after watching the game back a second time, especially about the defense. I think it was like a C- defensive game for the Hawks, which is not like good, obviously, again. But on a night where it was probably below average, defensively, the offensive failure was definitely a bigger story. And that third quarter was a microcosm of that. So it was 35-8 in the third quarter. I mean, I'll say that again later on, but wow, that's mind-blowing. 35 is not good to allow in a quarter, but so many of those points were directly as a result of the Hawks either missing a shot with a long rebound or having a turnover going the other way, downhill. They didn't give themselves a chance to defend in that period. And offensively, it was a failure. So there's that. So look, the games are 48 minutes long. And if you don't score more than a point per possession in a 48-minute game, you're going to lose 90% of the time. And that was the case in this spot. So as we'll get into later on, a little bit more probably, I think that some of the reaction was overboard in this game, as I'm kind of want to do. When the highs are high, I probably try to bring you down a little bit. When the lows are low, I bring it up a little bit. I get that. That's my tendency. And I think it's just kind of, me being me. But this is one game. The Hawks just won 4 games in a row. They essentially had one bad quarter in this game. Now, it was a total disaster of a quarter. I don't want to understate that. It was an absolute catastrophe. But it's one game in mid-March. And by the way, this isn't everything, but you're in a battle essentially with two teams, Orlando and Miami. And they both lost tonight as underdogs. All three teams were underdogs in their games tonight, and they all three lost. So the overall is kind of a net neutral. It doesn't feel that way. I promise you understand that. I know it's fruitless to some degree to kind of say that out loud. But, if this game seeps into Sunday when they play Brooklyn, if they play poorly in that game and lose, that would be a worse result. But in this game overall, yeah, does it feel worse because of the way it unfolded? Certainly it does. But big picture, it was a total disaster of a quarter. You want to flush that away. I get that. But in the meantime, weird one, but one that only counts once, fortunately, if you are the Hawks in this spot. All right, more to come on this game in a second, and we'll get to all of that and more when it comes to the breakdowns of the games and also my player-by-player evaluations and a brief look ahead to the week that's to come. All that's coming up in just one moment. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. March Madness is here, and we give you the chance at FanDuel to get on the action like never before. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and right now, if you're a new customer, get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. That's $200 extra bucks to bet on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and everything in between. Plus, even weigh in on which team's going to get down the nets at the end of the tournament. I've got my eye on a few underdogs this year, of course, and FanDuel is making it easier to back those underdogs with spreads and totals and player props, game props, future bets, live betting, same-game parlays, and so much more. And beyond college hoops, they have all kinds of other stuff at FanDuel as well. They have the NBA, of course, NHL, baseball season is all heating up, of course, as well. Football, golf, tennis, soccer, auto racing. They got boxing, MMA, and so much more. And with tournament games happening almost every day this month, there's always something going on and exciting to bet on at FanDuel Sportsbook. And the app's really easy to use as well. When you win, you get paid instantly with no waiting around at FanDuel. Again, if you are a new customer, get $200 in bonus bets. Your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. Place to go is FanDuel.com to get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. All right, we'll dive in now to how this game unfolded. And yeah, the first half was actually decent along the way. It was a long time ago now. Kind of a sloppy start, I would say, for both teams in this game. It was kind of a uneven performance, I would say, on the whole. In fact, in the first few minutes, LA had 3 turnovers in a row that were all live ball steals. Hawks had some errant passes. Mo Gay missed a layup that was kind of a funny miss in some respects. The Hawks were basically completely ignoring old pal Chris Dunn defensively. And LA figured that out to some degree, but also Dunn played 24 minutes and didn't score a point. I like Chris Dunn quite a bit. It was a shame that in Atlanta he got banged up, just couldn't play. But he's a great, not just good, great defender. But the Hawks, I think, smartly played off of him, and it was mostly effective, I would say. There was a massive help block by Mo Gay early on in the game. That was just when he was not guarding Dunn, and that strategy tended to generally work, not perfectly, but still it was kind of fine. The Hawks did score 6 straight points in the middle of the first quarter to take the lead a little bit. Rotationally, no big surprises here, although they did go smaller tonight than they generally have been. It was the same 10 guys that appeared on Wednesday. Clint Capella is still out with the family reasons that he missed the game on Wednesday as well, but it was Don Barlow backup center. The one thing the Hawks did do was play a lot smaller. Part of that was because of the way things went. Mo Gay and George Niang both had some weirdness, I would say, in this one. Mo's offense was lagging behind. Niang was minus 20 in 13 minutes, and that led the Hawks to going small a lot. Risacher played 37 minutes in this game, and that was not only because of garbage time. He played 20, I think it was 19 in the first half. He was actually their highest minute player because he played a lot of power forward in this game, which is probably the right choice in some respects. Kind of a slog early on. Both teams turned the ball over. Defensively turned the ball over to turn the other team over a lot, and that was kind of showing through early on in this one. It was back and forth in the second quarter. Both teams had kind of mini runs. Hawks had some turnovers. Trey's, as I said before, briefly I'll get back into later on, was really bad, I thought, in the first half of this game. Risacher had a great left-handed pass that I wanted to at least highlight to Dyson Daniels. He missed a shot, so it wouldn't make the huge highlight rounds, but it was a great look by Risacher with his left hand, kind of a whip pass across the court. Also made his first 4 shots in this game, did Zach. I thought the Hawks were a little bit too aggressive in their double teams on Zubats, who is by the way, underrated and very, very good player, but not like a guy you have to double on the catch. And the Hawks would be a little bit aggressive there. It kind of blew a couple of switches as a result of that, but nothing disastrous. Offensively, it was pretty good late in the quarter in particular. A nice cut by Risacher that was Okongwu that found him. He actually also did Okongwu have a fake DHO for a bucket. And Atlanta had a 15-4 run late in the second quarter to go up by as many as 11 points. In fact, they were up by 11 points in the final seconds of the first half. And then Nick Batum hit a three at the buzzer, and nothing went well after that, basically. But in the first half, Atlanta had 17 assists. They shot it well. Everything was going very well. And honestly, it was a very impressive performance when you take into account that Trae was as bad as he was, and he was really bad in that first half. The Hawks were still winning. And look, I wasn't necessarily trying to foreshadow a disaster, but I said going into halftime, or maybe early in the third quarter, even something like that on social media, like I was surprised the Hawks were winning with the way Trae had been playing. Because if you just said, look, Trae's going to be bad tonight, you're probably in trouble. And I didn't see the collapse coming, but I did think that it was not sustainable with the way Trae was playing. And unfortunately, it was not sustainable. Also, I want to at least note this before I go further. Bogey only played 21 minutes, I should say, but got the tribute video. Bogey was good. Actually made 3 or 4 shots in the first half. He talked after the game to a lot of the Hawks media in Atlanta. I don't have a huge takeaway. Like, I liked covering Bogey. Said this a lot post-trade. I understood trading him at the time. I always thought he was going to get better the rest of the season because he had been so bad early in the year, which he has done. So, like, nothing has shocked me that's happened so far, but I just want to acknowledge that. He came back, got a nice applause from the home crowd as he should have been. But anyway, I just want to mention that. Now, to the granular hideousness of the third quarter. I'll try to make this quickly, as quick as possible, let's just say. LA came out at halftime and scored the first 11 points, which was not like game ending, but it was a 14-0 run overall dating back to the 3 by Batum at the buzzer of the first half. The Hawks came out on their first several possessions and were 0-6 from the floor with 5 turnovers in 4 minutes. They didn't score for 4 full minutes coming out of the halftime break. Trae actually was the one that stopped that on a floater, but it did not get better from there. I thought that was probably going to be the low water mark of the game, and it really wasn't. It was probably their worst stretch of the game, to be fair, but it didn't get any better as that quarter went along. They actually went away from Mo Gay quickly because it was awful offensively. It wasn't like necessarily Mo's fault. They went to Niang trying to find something. I understand when things don't go well, fans do not. How do I put this? Fans tend to blame the coach sometimes. I get it. That's part of the deal. This one kind of baffled me because there was a lot of people saying it was like Quinn's fault that the third quarter happened, which I didn't really understand. Like, yeah, could he have done a couple things differently? Like, maybe. But, like, I didn't mind going away from Mogay. It was not going well. Going to Niang is natural. It didn't work, but it's kind of a natural thing you could do. The timeout usage, like, he didn't call one, like, right away, but, like, that's not out of the ordinary either. When it's this bad, it's the players. Like, you're missing a bunch of shots, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, Quinn gets the blame too, as he should, but it was not, like, Quinn's fault, quote unquote, in my opinion. I would say this. In addition to some ugly process, and there was some bad turnovers, shot selection, et cetera, the Hawks had at least, I watched this back again just now to make sure I wasn't crazy, 4 or 5 great looks, like either at the rim or from 3 that went like in and out in the third quarter. Like nothing was going in, which is part of this. That made things worse, obviously. There was a sequence in the third where Niang missed like a little like 5-foot flip shot. Then Dyson missed a 3-footer, like right back to back. And then the Hawks had called for goaltending defensively in between that. And it was like, all right, this was going to happen here. Atlanta was 4 of 12 in the paint in that quarter. So that speaks for itself. That's obviously brutal. And look, they came unglued. There's no excuse for it. Things do happen. Like it's 182 in some respects. And, if you want to go quarter by quarter, 1 of 328 in some respects. But a 35-8 quarter is just ridiculous. It is. That says it all, honestly, just a score. But it's technically a 38-8 run because of the 3 at the end of the first half. And here are the numbers. The Hawks were 4 of 23 from the field, 0 of 8 from 3, and they had 8 turnovers in the third quarter. That is just what it is. Like, that's 8 points on 25 possessions. Even a bad offense would score 25 points on 25 possessions. 8 points is comical. As many turnovers as points in a quarter is really, really rough. Also, I mentioned before it was the lowest scoring quarter of the season. That was true by a lot. In fact, the previous mark was 15. So they only scored just over half of that many points in the quarter tonight. That game, by the way, that which they had 15 points was actually the fourth quarter against Chicago in November. That was a bad loss when it happened. And it was kind of similar to this, honestly. It wasn't as bad as this, but like the way that it unfolded, it was like missed bunnies, missed open looks, turnovers, featuring defensive stuff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was very similar to this, just worse. But look, overall, I would say this. It was a little bit of everything in the third quarter. They missed good looks. They took bad shots. They turned the ball over, both live ball and non-live ball. And then crucially, they lost their composure and they got sloppy. The ball rolled down the hill on them. However you want to put that, whatever cliche you want to use, the Hawks did unravel beyond just the process stuff. And that's not acceptable. I'm not saying that it is. Like, you don't want to have that happen, but it's what happened. If you watch the last like 4 minutes of that quarter, they are spooling. It's bad. And they couldn't stop it. So one more stat, and I promise I'll stop with all the stats on the third quarter. But the last time the Hawks scored 8 points or fewer in a quarter before today was in January of 2013, more than 12 years ago. I was covering that team. I was covering that game, I'm sure, probably in the same way that I do now as pre-podcast. But the Hawks scored 58 points that night in the game. That was a different league, obviously, but this was not that. They were better than that. They're better than that the rest of the game tonight, but they have not scored that few points since 2013. So it's a rarity. For me, it's one you flush down the drain, but that's where I'll leave it. And in the fourth quarter, I'll say this. It felt like it was over at the end of the third. It wasn't, but even as someone who tries to be neutral and level-headed, I was like, this game's over. It felt that way. The Hawks actually had multiple shots in the air that would have cut the lead to like 12 or 13 in the third, like with plenty of time left. Of course, they didn't make them. And I think it was 14 at one point in the fourth quarter. Like, it was like right there. But you have to have a big run to cut it. The Hawks have actually won multiple games this year, trailing by more than they were trailing by in the second half of this game. It may not seem like that, but it was doable. But you have to have a big run at some point, and that run just never came. So no real drama in crunch time or garbage time or whatever. And I'll leave it there. But yeah, my apologies. Let us never speak of that third quarter again, and we'll leave it there for now. All right, more to come in a second on the play-by-play evaluations, as well as a look ahead to the future in just one moment. Today's show is sponsored by Monarch Money. Have you checked out your bank account and wonder actually where all of your money happened to go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track sometimes, and that's where Monarch Money comes in. Monarch Money is your personal CFO, giving you visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money is not just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, your investments, and your spending in one place, so you can stop managing your money and just start building your wealth today. When I started using Monarch, I realized how much money I was spending on food delivery and stuff like that. And right now, I budget smarter and save more because of Monarch. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan your long-term financial goals as well. And managing money with your partner is also smoother than ever at Monarch Money. You track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all of the stress. Take control of your finances right now with Monarch Money. And the promo code is LOCKEDONNBA. And when you go to monarchmoney.com, use that promo code one more time. It's LOCKEDONNBA. 50% off your first year at Monarch Money. One more time here at the end, monarchmoney.com. That's monarchmoney.com. Promo code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. All right, we'll dive in now to the player-by-player evaluations in this game, and obviously most of it is not great. 10 guys appeared for Atlanta. One guy who was healthy did not play was Garrison Matthews. Off the bench, George Niang had his worst game as a Hawk so far. 13 minutes, minus 20, 0-5 from the floor, 0-3 from 3, had an assist, 3 turnovers. Like, it was a disaster from George. I like George. He's been very valuable for the Hawks, by the way. Very valuable for the Hawks to this point. He was really bad in this game. Not much to add. Dom Barlow. Interesting game. 16 minutes off the bench, 10 points, 4 rebounds. So he was pretty good offensively. I think defensively, it was a reminder that Dom's got a long way to go. And, I don't think the Hawks, I'm not trying to say that they would have won the game, but the Hawks did miss Capella in this game, I thought, especially against Zubats. Just the size, the physicality that Capella can sometimes bring. His defense compared to Barlow's is a lot better than Barlow's. Now, offensively, Dom is a lot more skilled, so you're giving him a little bit more back. It's a little bit of a give and take. But Capella's still better overall, I think, as long as he's got some legs on him that night. But I thought Dom was not terrible, but defensively, he kind of showed the cracks a few times in this one. V. Krejci a couple threes in the first half. That was kind of it for V. Did have 2 assists. Looked fine-ish to me, but didn't do anything huge. Terrence Mann, against his old team, 27 minutes, 9 points, minus 19, had 4 assists, 3 rebounds. He was 3 of 3 on 2s, but only 1 of 5 from 3. He couldn't guard Kawhi. I was a little bit curious as to why they were doing that, having man guard Kawhi after Risacher had him early in the game. It didn't work. But, what are you going to do? But I thought that man probably played a little bit too much, but nothing crazy in the second half. And, again, nothing else was working. Karis LeVert, 21 minutes, 12 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals. I think Karis is one of their best players in this game. Honestly, probably should have played more. Was 2 of 5 on 2s, 2 of 4 from 3. Wasn't like he was great, but he was okay for grading on the curve in this one. Moge, 11 minutes as a starter. That's not very many minutes. But I thought he wasn't very good and didn't play again after the first little stint until garbage time. Nothing really to add there. Like, I think offensively, he was a part of the problem, but also was only minus 7 in the game in his 11 minutes. Like, they didn't get killed with him on the floor, but it was a not great Moge after he had been really good actually on Wednesday. Risacher was a bright spot along the way. 15 points, 7 rebounds, an assist, 2 steals. In 37 minutes, he was 5 of 7 on 2s, 1 of 3 from 3. Was good, honestly. He was probably, in fact, not even probably, he was the clearest bright spot for the Hawks in this game. He's been playing well. I've enjoyed watching him develop all year long. All the things that I've been saying still hold up. Not much to add about this, but he was good in this game, I thought, overall. Okongwu had a weird one. 18 points, 10 rebounds. So that's nice. 3 blocks as well. I thought he was just okay. He was minus 16 in the game. Like most guys were outscored by a lot in this one. I think defensively, other than the blocks, he wasn't particularly good. Zubac had a couple moments where he went right at him, but I thought Okongwu's skill level offensively did pop a few times in some like face-ups against Zubac, a couple nice passes along the way. He was probably the second guy. Like, I think Risacher was probably the guy that I would say, all right, he played pretty well. Okongwu and LeVert were probably some mixture of the next two. Dyson's defense is always really good. We'll talk about him now. I think offensively, Dyson was really rough in this one, probably his worst game in a while. Defensively, he was still good, and also was a game best -1. So the Hawks got trounced without him on the court. Not a huge surprise. But offensively, he was 2 of 8 on 2s, 0 of 4 from 3. So 6 points on 13 shooting possessions. Tough to overcome that, even with 3 steals and 5 assists. Like, he played fine overall, but offensively, it was really rough. Defensively was good. And there you go. And then finally, Trae Young had a very, very bad game here. 17 points on 20 shooting possessions. It's not as bad as it honestly felt, but because in the fourth quarter, he had a couple of buckets. So through 3 quarters, Trae was pretty much a disaster by his standards in particular. Did have 7 assists, also had 7 turnovers in this game, -15. Yeah, I mean, that Boston game was the only game this year that I think he was clearly worse than he was tonight. It was probably in his bottom 5 of performances. I should always note this after the game. He was asked in the locker room about, and people noticed this, including me, a press row during the game. To begin the game, he had this like left shoulder wrap on underneath his jersey while he was playing. He said, actually, post-game, he actually aggravated that injury last game on Wednesday when he actually took a foul from Nurkic in the first quarter. He removed the sleeve during the game because he kind of cited his shooting struggles during the game, and also said he has to plan to work moving forward. I'm not sure how serious that injury is, just kind of something to keep in mind. But for me, it wasn't the shooting. Like, yes, he had some bad shooting moments in this game, some missed floaters that he usually would make, et cetera, et cetera. But his decision-making was weirdly bad in this game. Like, he kept getting caught in between certain things. It was a little bit jumpy. Just wasn't settled at all. And I asked Quinn about that post-game. He didn't really answer other than just, like, put it back on the team. He did say that Trae is number 1 on the call sheet, and that's true. Like, Trae's seen all the defenses, and LA, by the way, is great defensively. And I did note that in the preview. They have got, Chris Dunn is one of the 3 best perimeter defenders in the league, probably top 5. Like, he's awesome, and he was a factor. They have bodies to throw at Trae. Like, it's a bad matchup for Trae. But I thought Trae also just was very jumpy and overzealous, and a couple of just really bad reads, and just had a bad game. Like, it happens. It doesn't mean he's terrible. It's just he was bad in this game. And if he doesn't play well on this level, like if he's this, the Hawks are not going to be able to score. And that's what happened on the whole in this one. All right. Mercifully, I should say, that's the end of the game. But briefly looking ahead here, one more time, the Hawks did actually only have a break-even night and that's a positive, given the loss, because the Magic lost and the Heat lost. And so the Hawks still have a 1.5 game lead on Orlando and a 2.5 game lead on Miami. Miami, by the way, is absolutely free fall. They've lost 6 games in a row at this point. But that, if you're trying to find optimism, number one, I would say this game is just 1 of 82. That's 1 point of optimism. Number two is that they didn't even lose ground in the standings. All 3 teams were underdogs tonight. They all 3 lost. We'll just call it a wash and move on. But from here, the Hawks are finally back on the road again. They have been at home for like 11 days, 6 games, etc. They have a 2-game road trip now to Brooklyn on Sunday and then Charlotte on Tuesday. No home games until Saturday, actually, now, about 8 days. Obviously, neither of the Nets or Hornets are very good. But as I always say on the show, be consistent, there's still games in the NBA. There's still NBA teams, also the road games, which adds a little bit more intrigue. So nothing is assured, but obviously a little bit more urgency now if you were the Hawks after this way this game went to win on Sunday. We'll talk about that game when it happens. But a nice, not the worst schedule stretch to have happen after this one, but so we win the games, and we'll see if who's playing and the injury stuff or whatever. But a road game, also a PSA. It's a 6:00 Eastern time scheduled game on Sunday. It's a little bit earlier than usual, and we'll have a full breakdown of that game as we always do after it is over. All right, everybody, that's all I have on this particular evening. I am fairly confident, even as I said this, but that people are not going to follow this show all the way to the end. But if you're a sicko and follow the show all the way to the end here, thank you so much for listening or watching the podcast. Please subscribe to the show anywhere you find your podcast. We're on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're on Amazon. We're also on YouTube. So please like the video. One more time here, like the video and subscribe on that platform. Comment, spread the word to your friends. Also follow the show on X/Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there at BT Rowland. Follow my work on Blue Sky at BT Rowland, and then also my written/extra audio work at patreon.com/BT Rowland. All right, everybody, enjoy your weekend. I'll have a show in about 48 hours after Hawks Nets, and we'll see you all next time.